Welcome to the Faith Forms podcast, where we explore the question, what does it mean to be a Christian in the games industry? I'm Brock Henderson, and today my good friend Mike Perrotto is joining me. Mike and I have worked together on numerous projects with Numinous Games. He's a streamer, programmer, and the best project manager I've ever worked with. So I'm really excited to talk with him today. I know you will come away blessed. Hey, Mike, thanks for joining me on the second episode of the Faith Forms podcast.
Absolutely. So happy to be here.
Mike, you are one of the biggest gamers I know. When did you fall in love with games?
I would probably say back in probably 1986 or 1987, we got our first Nintendo Entertainment System and a little old game called Legend of Zelda. We borrowed it from my uncle. And he had actually gone through and drew maps on graph paper of all the different areas in the world and all the different dungeons. And I just could not believe that you could have this crazy adventure all within the TV screen and then a few buttons on a controller. It was magical at the time. And even today, I find myself playing games that make me feel that magical again.
That was such a good game. Did experiences like that make you want to make games early on?
I think so. I mean, I didn't really understand really anything about game development or anything until I was probably probably an early teenager. So probably 12, 13, 14. Um, and then I did once I got my own computer in my room when I was probably 14, and I started writing in QBasic. I started learning QBasic and just making little adventure games, word-based adventure games. And that's kind of where the love and me kind of realizing that it was a possibility kind of started.
Nice. Yeah, that's what our friend Ryan Green said, that you two used to make basic games together. Yep.
Yeah, we made basic games and then we taught ourselves C. And then we got into ANSI art for a while. And so we would use an application called Acid Draw, which dates me way back to the mid 90s. But it was super fun. It was kind of my first experience of kind of like pixel art.
So you've been programming a really long time.
Yeah. Yeah. Right out of high school, literally the week before we graduated, I got a job as a web developer. So I was making websites back during the dot-com boom, moved on from there into the healthcare industry. And then eventually, about 10 years ago, made it into games finally.
Was that with That Dragon Cancer?
Yep.
So not only are you a game developer, you're also a streamer. How long have you been doing that?
Oh man, I've been streaming for a really long time and my follower count does not represent that. But I've been streaming for gosh, almost 10 years, probably. Almost 10 years. I started doing it I started before that even. I started doing a yearly charity called Extra Life, raising money for Children's Hospital. And a lot of that was because of Ryan and Amy's son Joel. I wanted to do something to, just kind of raise money for the hospital that was taking care of their son. And so I felt like that was a really good thing to do. Um, since then, I put together a team, and our team has raised over $50,000 in the past 11 years. So it's been a lot of fun. And then I turned that into streaming. And so I stream primarily to raise money for Children's Hospital as well.
That's super cool, Mike. That's
Yeah.
a lot of money. Thanks. What are you streaming now?
Right now, the games on my list, mainly because The Last of Us is on HBO and it's getting a lot of talk. People are talking about it. Every time I go to a podcast to listen about a kind of a breakdown of one of the episodes, they tend to throw in Last of Us 2 spoilers, and I haven't played Last of Us 2. So I am currently playing through Last of Us 2, and I'm also playing a game called Marvel's Midnight Suns, which is absolutely fantastic. It is better than I ever could have hoped. To me, it's kind of a sleeper hit. There's a group of people that love it, but it wasn't marketed super well. And so I think hopefully will have a long tail because it is a fantastic game.
I know you've streamed a lot of classic games. What game has given you the most followers?
Yeah. I was playing through and still kind of am the entire Final Fantasy series. I'm a huge Final Fantasy fan. I love JRPGs. And when I played through that, a lot of the big title games. So Final Fantasy 4 and Final Fantasy 7 and like 9 and 10 tend to get a large response because people, especially if you throw up there like, hey, this is the first time I'm like playing through it, or first time I'm trying to get like 100% or something. It tends to bring out the fans and they want to watch you and they want to, give their advice and all kinds of stuff and tell you how you're, fighting a boss wrong or whatever. And I'm usually pretty cool with all of that because I've played most of these games to some degree. Um, and so I'm not too concerned about spoilers or anything like that. So I just say, yeah, sure, I'll try your method or whatever. Like I don't claim to be an expert. I'm just having fun because I love the series. But those tend to get pretty big numbers. I've been playing a game called Octopath Traveler Champions of the Continent, which is a mobile game, and it's a prequel to Octopath Traveler that came out on the Switch, and I think now is also available on PC. Um, but that game has been getting a pretty big response in my stream. I think people just like to watch gotchas and people like pull for characters and stuff like that. So that's always fun. And I actually turn those into pull videos that I put up on my YouTube channel and they get pretty good responses too. So it's been fun.
Nice. At the end of the episode, I'll have you plug your channel, and hopefully you can gain some more viewers.
Cool.
So, in addition to being a game developer and a streamer, you also happen to be one of the best project managers I know. I've been on a bunch of different teams over the years and in a lot of different styles, but there's something about you, Mike, that sets you apart. And that's why I'm really excited to have you here, because I want to pick your brain.
Let's do it.
I'd like to understand what you think makes a great project manager.
I think there's a lot of things, but what I tend to lean on there's a few big things, and I'll try to hit those if I can. I think one, and we'll come back to this, but I think one of the primary things is showing respect and love to your team. I think that's a huge thing. And I've been in teams where the project managers really just kind of phoned it in, where they've also let the development team kind of walk all over them, or the things that they're planning and the things that they're saying don't really fly with the dev team. So I've seen a lot of ways that you can fail and kind of not even like fail spectacularly, but just like fail kind of silently. Like the project manager ends up kind of just going by the wayside and the dev team is ultimately somewhat out of control and before the project manager even really notices it.
Yeah.
So I think there's a couple important things there. Obviously, organization, you got to be a highly organized person. You kind of got to like to play with spreadsheets and look at calendars, and like that kind of has to be your jam, which for me, I'm very detail oriented and I like to work off of, task lists and spreadsheets and timelines and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just driven that way anyway, whether I'm a developer or I'm project managing or QA managing or whatever. That's just how I keep things organized. But to kind of come back to some of the things that I see there, maybe I try to do a little differently, I guess, are, respecting and loving your team. I think it's really important to kind of work with your team and find out what their strengths and weaknesses are and do your best to play to those. Another thing that has always helped me, and this isn't necessarily a requirement for a project manager to be good, but it always has helped me, is that I do know some of the technical things behind, what we're doing. So I can apply my knowledge as a developer and be able to help the developers that I know, I know where they excel and where they don't excel. And so I can kind of help say, like, these are the tasks you should probably take on to be most successful. And then if we're in a crunch time, it's like, hey, aces in their places. We need the best people for the best things doing those things first. And then once we get out of crunch time, like we can talk about, okay, let's go growth. Let's talk about what are some things you want to challenge yourself with. And that's where the respect and like the trust on the team comes in. Like folks want to start doing stuff that they've never done before, and we need to let them grow and breathe. And that's a great gift to give them. And so that's one of the other things I think of when I think of like loving and respecting your team.
That's really good. Yeah, I'm so glad that you talked about that, because that's what I wanted to specifically talk to you about. Because I think being a Christian in this industry, we should be marked by love, right? That's what Jesus talked about. It's our defining feature. And so,
Absolutely.
a project manager, you're like a cornerstone of the whole team, and like the whole project kind of You're kind of like holding it together in some respects, right?
Mhm.
So what have you noticed? Like, is there any common tension points or places where teams usually get tripped up that you've seen over your years?
Yeah, I think there's probably a number of things. Some of the things that stand out to me are um process for the sake of process. I think teams I think there's a way that you can introduce process into a dev team or a development cycle
Mhm.
in a way that also it lets them trust you. I have been on a lot of teams where it really felt like process was being put in place just because it's like the textbook way to do something. And I'm a firm believer from a project management standpoint that like single not every single thing works for every team.
Mhm.
And so you kind of need to pick and choose. And so I love that like I've got some kind of a broad experience. Like I'm not certified as a project manager or a scrum master or any of that kind of stuff, but I've taken classes. I've worked with many different project managers and scrum masters over the years. And whenever I approach, a new team or something, I like to pick and choose like what do I think is going to work for this team. And I always want to display that with some facts. So I
Mhm.
think another really big thing with a project manager is, being honest and coming to the table with facts. Um, a lot of times as a project manager, you're the person that the higher ups are going to be talking to as a direct kind of conduit for the dev team. Like you're the spokesperson for the dev team in a way. And so coming to them with like, this is what we did, during this last iteration. This is how much we did. This is how much we predict we're going to do. A lot of that is very important and coming to it with actual numbers. I remember when I first was introducing kind of a scrum mentality to one of our teams. I remember that very first, after the first like 2 or 3 weeks, because we had I think we did 1 week iterations. And so after like the third iteration, I was sitting in the room with like one of the vice presidents of development. And I was like, you don't know how good it feels for me to sit here now and tell you that we're going to be late. But I actually have the data as to why we're going to be late. Because before it was always just like, we're late and I really don't know why other than we didn't get it done,
Yeah.
you know? And so having that data was just like night and day different. And the response they gave me back when I told them that, and I told them exactly what the data was and like when we predicted we could finish things, they took that so much better.
Mhm.
And so I think being very data driven, being very honest, um, and just showing a lot of respect is huge.
And along with that, another, I guess, area that I see a lot is just scope. Scope tends to balloon. Oftentimes, you get creative people in a room, they just start riffing. How do you lovingly help people stay within scope or kind of rein them back when you need to?
Yeah, that's really tough. And I mean, you and I have worked together for a while now, and you've seen me struggle with this. We both have struggled with this. And I think most developers do struggle with this. Project managers, developers, the QA team, like they all struggle with, scope creep and how do you kind of rein it back? I think it's tough. I think the best thing is to be honest. I There really isn't a better antidote for that. Like there really isn't like a trick or anything. It's more just we need and it kind of goes along with data, right? Like if you can say and you can tell these creatives, like they don't care about data. Like the creatives, they just want to be creative and they want to, they want all their ideas to end up in the product or in the game or whatever you're doing. And I'm not saying in a bad way they don't care, but it's the last thing on their mind, right? Um, so if you can kind of come in and you can say, okay, like all this is great, we've had this amazing brainstorming session. Now it's my job to help prioritize, and we draw a line somewhere based on how much time we have and how fast we think we can go. And that's my job is to make sure that that line is there and everybody knows about it. So usually I try to create something like a dashboard or some sort of a view where we can say, these are all the major features. This is where the line is. Here's all the nice to haves, everything that's going to get dropped off if we don't have time. And sometimes that can be a way to motivate someone who, might want to dig in really, really hard on like one specific feature and spend a lot of time on it. It might be a way for them to say, you know what, I've spent enough time on this because I really want to make sure that like item, whatever, gets above the line.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you're tricking them. It's like a game. It can be, right? But you're doing it in such a way that it's like none of this stuff is throwaway. It's all on the list. It's just a matter of what can we get done and when we think we can do it. And so that's kind of how I like to kind of architect it a bit.
Mike, that was so good. I think those insights are really going to help people. I'd like to change gears now and ask you about what you're currently working on and what kind of stuff gets you excited about games these days.
Gosh, I mean, I'm currently working on some VR projects right now. We're doing a prototype, which is really exciting. I really feel like virtual reality hasn't quite hit its kind of mass, especially in adoption. I feel like there's certain things that they're working really well, and I think things have been developed really well. And there's some really compelling experiences, but I think there's a ways to go still. So I'm really excited for that. I'm starting to dig into some AR stuff too, which I've never really done before. So some of this augmented reality stuff is really, really interesting. Other things that are really exciting, I think, are the new various ways that people are telling stories in the industry. I'm very excited about it. Like playing through, I kind of came late to the whole Last of Us series, and just the amount of quality storytelling that's being told there is just fantastic. Whether you like the content or not, like the stories that are being told are extremely well crafted. The actors have performed them extremely well. The animators have animated the emotion into these characters on the screens in such a great way that it just has me very excited about like where this industry can go and what kind of stories it can tell moving forward. Obviously, we were a part of that Dragon Cancer, and being able to tell such an emotional story through this medium was huge. And I've just seen leaps and bounds in the quality of that over the past 6-7 years.
Yeah, we've done two games about cancer together. And then we also did the Playability Initiative.
Mhm.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that and just like Jack and some of the impact you saw there?
Yeah, so for those who don't know, the Playability Initiative was something that Numinous Games kind of started up, and it's still there, just not being actively worked on at the moment, just for funding reasons, as everybody in the indie game industry knows. That's what happens. But we're really focusing on creating experiences that anyone can play. And so we focused on a game called Painted Waters, and that was a one button game. And so if you could flip a switch or use a sit puff or push a button or do anything that would kind of just turn on and off something like a 1 and a 0, right? It was very binary. You could play the entirety of that game. And so we've been looking at ways to take that architecture that we developed for Painted Waters and see if we can apply it in different contexts, which is where we kind of are right now, in somewhat of a holding pattern. And what was really cool about the entire thing is that we got to meet such incredible people, and we did focus on a specific population for that game. It was the spinal muscular atrophy population, and these kids just have this disease that just deteriorates really early in age. So like most of them were born with it, and within a year or two, they were usually like wheelchair bound for the rest of their lives. And we met a young man by the name of Jack, who was, let's see, I think he was like 24, 25 years old. And so he was helping us test because he did everything with eye gaze. So he used from his chair, he used an eye gaze system and was able to do work. He worked for a school and did like Excel spreadsheets because he was just a whiz at math. And so he loved playing with Excel spreadsheets, which is why I think him and I got along pretty well. But he would use eye gaze to do that. And then we kind of engaged him, and we would meet with him once a week and just have like a little, hour-long block where we would just have him test out different eye gaze configurations that we were playing around with. And just, he was giving us, super valuable feedback on how that all worked. Unfortunately, he passed away a year ago, and it was pretty devastating. But we all knew it was coming.
Yeah.
But he was a super special guy, and we loved him. And Ryan and I were able to go out to their funeral out in Pennsylvania, and that was really cool. We got to meet up with his dad because I hadn't met his dad in person, so it was really cool to get to meet him and talk to his family and see all the people in his community that he impacted. It was pretty special. So
Yeah, it was pretty beautiful. We got to make a few mini games for him, right? Inspired
yeah.
his likes and stuff, and get to see
Yep,
it.
we got the zip line and the fountain in the game for him, and that was like his favorite things.
And the boomy towers that he gets knocked down. Yeah, it's pretty cool to be able to work on a project like that. To it just had God's heart, right? Like
Yeah,
designing for the one, the least of these. And,
absolutely.
and accessibility it's really hard to, I guess, design for if you're a small indie game. Like the big studios have a budget for it and they can afford to dedicate time and resources to it. But as
Yeah,
a team, it's very difficult.
yeah. I think I think we had a very unique position, especially as an indie company, because we decided to kind of start with that first. And if we hadn't, there's no way we would have been able to make that work. There's no way we would have had time to try to bolt something on after the fact. And I think that totally worked to our advantage. And I think that's where what we've got in our in our architecture, I think is going to be hopefully helpful in the future. Hopefully we'll be able to do more of that kind of stuff. I'm excited about that possibility.
Before we say goodbye, I'd really like to hear about your journey of faith and how you became a Christian.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's hopefully not too long of a story, but let's see if I can rein it in here a bit. So I grew up in kind of the Catholic religion, but we were kind of like Catholic light, it was like, I went to Sunday school, I did my first communion, kind of all that stuff. I was baptized as a baby, and then we would only go to church really on like Easter,
Mhm.
Christmas, and like weddings and funerals. Like that was the extent of my church going for most of my life growing up. Actually, for pretty much all of my non-adult life, that was pretty much it. So fast forward a little bit after I kind of was an adult and like moved out of the house, and I met my now wife, Cheryl. We came back to church through a program called Financial Peace University. So through Dave Ramsey's thing. So we found a church that was doing it, was hosting it. And so we started going to church there after we, met the pastor and all that kind of stuff, and did the class for a few weeks. And then we were like, hey, let's just try the church out. So we tried the church out. And it seemed like at the time a really good fit. And my wife had asked the pastor, like, hey, is there like a new believers like group or anything like that we could join? And he's like, no, but you are now the leader of the new believers group. Which is, I think, and we didn't know this at the time, but like when I talk to Christians about it, they're like, yeah, that's exactly what happens. If you ask for something and it's not there, you have become the leader of it. We did not know this. So that was pretty funny. So, because we're not like, I've never been like, I've always been like kind of a believer, right? I've always kind of believed in God, but I didn't really know a lot of the very specific things that came along with Jesus and committing myself to Jesus. And I always believed in it, but just it never was a thing that I lived much. I think there's a big difference between like just saying, yeah, I believe in God versus like, yes, I believe and I also kind of live this way. So we started kind of starting to live that way and started thinking that way. And so a few years after I think about 2 years after we started going to church there, we both we got baptized together at the church, which was really cool. So it was a really awesome experience. And yeah, it's been pretty great since then. I mean, obviously in the today's climate, like we still struggle with faith and like what it means to be a Christian and all that stuff. And for me, it's always kind of fallen back to like it doesn't matter if I can like recite, Bible verses, it doesn't so that stuff doesn't matter. Like if I can show people what it's like to be a follower of Jesus, if I can show people love, which is like it's kind of like why we were talking about, uh even just showing love in the work that we do. I think that's extremely important. Like I can talk to people about this stuff all day long, but until they see me doing what I'm saying, like they're not going to believe a word I say. And so I really believe that it's about showing. showing that love and that acceptance and that everything, the things that Jesus preached. Like, he hung out with, the craziest people, and we should be, loving all the people exactly the same way.
Right on. Did you know about financial peace, or were you and your wife just looking for some help with your finances at the time?
Yeah, like I hadn't heard of it at all until it was actually Ryan and Amy. They invited me to their church for one, because like when you take financial peace, they say, every person who takes it can bring like a friend one night out of the series or whatever. But and then it was a 13-week course. I think now it's 9. And they always recommended that you invite them to come to the like get out of debt lesson, which is like the third or fourth lesson in the series. Where he really that's like Dave on steroids, because he's like pumped up and trying to get people out of debt. And that his whole mantra is like, get out of debt, get out of debt, right? And so we went to that one, and it kind of fired us up, and we were just like, "Oh," like we had debt, like we had, our house loan, we had our car loans, we had a couple credit cards, like most typical Americans. Um, and so we were just kind of thinking, is there a better way to do this? And sure enough, Dave's course got us to the point where we're debt free except for the house. It put us on a really good path to feeling better, being able to give the way that we want to give and all that kind of stuff, which was huge.
It's made such an impact in your life that you've gone on to teach it as well, right?
Yeah, yeah. We're not doing it anymore, but we were. We taught it for like 7 years, I think. Yeah. And when I say teach, we were just the organizers, but
Sure, sure.
but we were leading the small groups and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, we did that for quite a while.
Mike, it looks like it's coming to the end of our time. Is there anything you'd like to plug?
Oh man, can I plug some stuff? Definitely. So a couple different things. Obviously, Numinous Games is near and dear to me just because I've known you guys for a long time, Ryan and Amy, everybody that we've been working with. So we did release a game over the summer called Area Man Lives. It's a virtual reality, basically like a virtual reality radio drama. So it's got voice detection. So it literally talks to you and you can talk back, and then it responds in different ways. We have a couple of pretty classy voice actors on the list. We have Joel McHale, known from the TV show Community, and plenty of other projects. We have Max Greenfield from New Girl. We have Ronan Farrow, the amazing New York. I think he works for New York Times, maybe. But yeah, he's stellar cast. I'm in there too. I do like 3 different voices, so it's super fun. But it's available on Quest 2, the Oculus Store. It's available on Steam. It's available on Vive. So pretty much every VR headset you can get it at. But definitely check it out. Would help us out a ton. And then you can find me during the week and on the weekends, usually streaming for a couple hours. I try to carve out a couple hours a night or in the mornings when the kids are just kind of vegging on TV stuff in the morning. I'll maybe at twitch.tv/Sir Mr. Clean. That's SIRMRCL3AN.
Cool.
And then
We'll
same
have,
on YouTube. YouTube, Sir Mr. Clean on YouTube as well.
we'll have links down below.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, Mike. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this was awesome. Thank you for having me.
Hey, this is Brock. Thank you so much for listening to the second episode of our podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I could use your help. Please tell your friends and help spread the word about the Faith Forums podcast. Also, if you could take a moment and rate us or leave a comment, that'd be a huge, huge help to us. Thank you and God bless.